After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower, otherwise mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining us and letting us do what we do for you every morning here on YouTube and Rumble, and coming soon, as the graphic said, to WTON and beyond. Still working on it. Still, for the folks in Charlottesville, they're like, well, on the other side, what about me in Fluvanna? And we're working on it. We are working on it all the time for you. As a matter of fact, I think I can safely say I've been busier the last 2 weeks than I was when I had a job. So I guess, what is it they say? You're supposed to work harder when you're not working than when you're working, because finding a new job should be your number one occupation. Of course, this is a weird scenario here where we know what we're going to be doing as soon as the FCC. We did some arithmetic, and it could be mid-May. 45 days from Good Friday, and then closings and things like that. That's when the lawyers get in, and it always becomes fun then. And believe me, the lawyers I've been dealing with, they have an entire thesaurus of ways of calling me stupid. So that's always fun when I get to talk to those folks there. Happy Earth Day to you all, and of course by Earth Day I mean Lenin's birthday. Of course, right there's the that's what you should be seeing. Happy Earth Day to you all there as you celebrate Earth Day or Lenin's birthday or both here. And there's an important connection to it. And I know that much is consumed on the internet. And who knows, that could be strike three as far as YouTube is concerned, because apparently yelling ivermectin in a crowded emergency room isn't a no-no to YouTube anymore. But that one might be strike three. So as you celebrate Lenin's birthday, Earth Day today. No, you've got the wrong. That's the one. As you celebrate this morning, understand that this agenda is very much Marxism. Václav Klaus's wonderful book, Blue Planet and Green Shackles, chronicles how, having helped the Czech Republic escape communism, he was immediately hit up by the New World Order, Build-A-Bear group, Davos crowd about the green agenda. And he realized, he said, well, my gosh, this is very similar to what we did under Marxism and Leninism. So keeping in mind that Marx, the theoretician behind some of the most deadly regimes on the planet's history, more body bags filled with more people that, how did Marx put it? Some just won't go along with the program, and they'll have to be removed from the community. Touches you right here. That's right up there. In terms of governing philosophy, isn't that right up there with, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal? Some people won't get along with the movement, and they'll have to be removed from the community. There's Marx for you. So Lenin took Marx, as Don McLean once sang. Lenin read a book on Marx, and he wasn't meaning John and Groucho, and said, wow, I can work this out. And understand, tell me if any of this sounds familiar. So Vlad the first Vlad the First of the Soviet Union, not to be confused with Vlad the Invader, currently running the the Soviet Union in exile. So Vlad the First says, hold it. The Tsar has created all these poor people in his mismanagement of the country. And I'm going to say the Tsar was to be, but there wasn't anything substantively wrong except there were people who were living in poverty in early 20th century Russia. But Vlad Ilyich, he had a plan, because he felt that being smarter than the Tsar and certainly all of his ministers, that he, along with Rasputin, would overthrow the Tsar and create this communist paradise. But of course, as Dr. Clark, our dear friend, has said before, communism is not an abject failure, because communism's entire premise is to concentrate power in the hands of a few instead of one. So Marx didn't invent totalitarianism. He found a new sales pitch for it, a new slogan for it, a happier face for totalitarianism. Why, we won't have one dictator, we'll have a political bureau of dictators. It's too wordy, so we'll call it a Politburo. They'll be the dictators, and the central committee of the only party in this country will be really the ones who decide everything. But that's not totalitarians. That's not dictatorship. No. You're misunderstanding. Dictatorship is one person. We're talking 4, 6, somewhere around there. So, I mean, this couldn't be dictatorship. So Lenin took this idea and said, well, this is great, and convinced the impoverished of Russia to rise up against the Tsar and follow him, because he would bring the great revolution, his Green New Deal, actually in his case the Red New Deal. And this has been the paradigm, the centralized planning of Marxism is all part and parcel of this Green New Deal. This idea that the green agenda can be enforced on people just with the wave of a wand and the insistence of, if you follow us or you go to jail. Follow us and we'll wreck your business. Follow us and we will arrest family members of yours. All of this in the name of something that is completely and patently unproven, and in many cases has been proven to be completely false. And we've got some documentary evidence of that, and we'll get into that as the program. People, one of my favorite parlor tricks at cocktail parties amongst conservatives is I like to tell people that I'm friends with Chris Horner, the author of Red Hot Lies and Power Grab and the Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming, and I know it's early for him, so what I'm going to do is I've got some archived footage of Chris talking about this very thing with us back in the day. We've been bugging Chris probably since 2010 to come on the program, because I'm like, Chris Horner, what? Like I said, I try to be very fair to Chris, because at some point your forehead starts to flatten out because they find new ways to bring this up. And currently his work has been in the way they hide things from you, the way they bury things in procedures so that you can't see what's going on. And one of those subjects came up this weekend. We were talking about the Ukraine aid deal that was ramrodded through. This was right out of Nancy Pelosi's playbook. We got to vote for it before we can read it. So on Saturday, they kept Congress in session for the weekend because everybody's working on the weekend. And the more Congress is in session, the better it is for you, isn't it? So they brought Congress into session, and they had them meet on Saturday and voted for this Ukrainian aid package. And this is right out of what Chris Horner has been doing these days with the Government Accountability and Oversight Group. This is classically a money laundering scheme. So what we've done now is, without oversight, we're sending. I've got the paper here somewhere. I'll get it for you. So the actual dollar figure, the next dollar figure of aid to Ukraine without oversight. So then what Ukraine can then do is spend that money on American defense contractors that we couldn't give the money to directly because, budgets and oversight and things like that. And people might say, hey, why did they get extra money? And it's all the shell game of like, well, we gave it to Ukraine, and Ukraine spent it at insert, Grove. What was the Remo Williams movie? Grove Industries was the military contractor that was on the take. And that's what they're doing now. So they give the money to Ukraine, and then Ukraine spends it on their friends, their campaign contributors in the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. So if you want to find what Chris Horner's been doing now, and this began with his whole pursuit of the green agenda, the Green New Deal, and all of that. He started doing this, and then as he started trying to find the details behind people like Michael Mann's work, Michael Mann, of course, the UVA professor, famous for his hockey stick graph, he started to realize that the left really doesn't want you to know what they're doing, laughably, because they wrote most of the transparency legislation. Most of the FOIA laws were written and shepherded in by folks like Hillary Clinton, ironically. And of course, you get these laughable moments where Sheila Jackson, the head of the EPA, is hiding her name. Richard Windsor was her fake email account. And of course, nowadays, she's just self-identifying as the guy now. We can't, you better not virtue shame, somebody, so she's the female head of the EPA. She just wants to be Richard Windsor. Who are you? Who are you to judge? So running into this FOIA wall, he started to realize that there's a problem with the way they hide things. And he's got amazing reports out there now. Law enforcement for rent, government for rent. He's even chronicled now, and you can find his work at govoversight.org, how people like Michael Bloomberg, and again, we're talking money laundering here, he'll take money from contributors, pass it through his nonprofit, pay for lawyers to work in attorneys general offices. And then you might get a letter. Hold on, the Attorney General is doing an investigation, might do an investigation into my fundraising? Weren't we just talking about this last week, how they're targeting the people who go into and give money to these organizations for investigation to stop you from giving money to them, because they figure if they can stop the money from flowing, it'll stop them from flowing. Lots of other things to get into. The border, Congressman Ben Cline, it was a great piece on the border, more about Earth Day. Sorry, Lenin's birthday, Earth Day, it all sounds so similar. Also, the Trump trial heads into week 2, and even Gavin Newsom is saying, maybe we need to throttle back some of the coverage here, boys and girls. But we'll get into all of that. You as well, 434-882-4217. You call that number. You leave a voicemail. We are close to having the new equipment in place so we can go back to talking to you live. But if you have a thought on any of this stuff, including the Columbia University president saying to the Jews, get out, Get out now. Of course, he did everything short of saying, hey, there's a train waiting for you over here, because we've seen this story before. And of course, the rioting because the UN was about to vote on letting Palestine in, and the U.S. voted against it. So we'll get into all that coming up.
This is the Racing Wire Minute with Brian Belansky.
A crazy finish at Talladega. That story next.
The Racing Wire Minute is presented by
She can stand, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
The last lap at Talladega ended with a huge wreck, a wreck that's become synonymous with restrictor plate racing. Michael McDowell tried to block Brad Keselowski twice on the run between turn 4 and the finish line. The second block is where McDowell's ambition outpaced his talent, and the driver spun, taking out much of the field behind him. One of the cars that squeezed past the carnage, Tyler Reddick in Michael Jordan's 45 car. Reddick took the win, his first win of the year and first at Dega. None of the drivers were hurt in the big crash, but a lot of cars were crunched up. Keselowski finished second. Noah Gragson, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and Alex Bowman rounded out the top 5.
After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower, otherwise mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining in with us and letting us do what we do with you here on YouTube and Rumble. And we're going to keep some of this going on because looking at radio is such a scintillating thing. I'm told people are curious. It's probably one of those things like if you see police lights on the side of the highway and your curiosity has you looking like, you know something not good has happened, but you're curious and you're going to look anyway. That's kind of, I think, what drives people to watch folks like me do radio. There's this like, is that what he looks like? Is that real? Is that Glenn Beck's like ugly cousin? In any event, more to do here. Much fun and frolic was had on the behalf of the Green Agenda when China, the developing the developing economy of China, was hosting an Olympiad in Beijing, and fortunes were spent to create a set where Bob Costas could sit there and not show how polluted the air was over Beijing. They couldn't do it. They shut entire sectors of industry down in Beijing for 6 months before the Olympiad arrived in the Chinese Communist Party's capital. And yet they still couldn't get the air to look anything more than dingy brown. I mean, it looked like the entire city was populated by Pigpen from the Charlie Brown comic book. So they had Bob Costas, instead of sitting on a platform with the city and all of its resplendence behind him, they had a painting of Beijing as his backdrop. I mean, at least here, I can go and grab one of these books, like the Matt Kibbe book back there, Don't Hurt People, Don't Take Their Stuff. I mean, those are real. That's not a painting. But Bob Costas was sitting in front of an artist's rendering, lovingly painted, of what Beijing's skyline would look like if you could see it. So, to be fair, I want to share this story with you, since it is Lenin's birthday. I mean, Earth Day. And I wanted to share this story because, well, Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is my psychiatrist. And so I want to share this story from Paris. NBC News reporting, meandering down the Seine River, the light breeze, gentle current, and the sun's glistening rays weren't the only things the three kayakers were hoping to catch on this warm spring day. They were also on the hunt for garbage. By attaching nylon stockings to the side of their kayaks, they scooped up even the smallest fragments of plastic, as well as the everyday detritus of life in the French capital that washes to the river's surface every time it rains. Remember, the Arc de Seine Kayak Club then sent what they had collected to be tested for bacterial levels. My kayak capsized this morning and I'm okay, laughed Paul Macad on Sunday, the Pont de Cervez in central Paris. But while Macad, 40, and his fellow boaters said they were not scared of getting into the river, with less than 100 days to go before the 2024 Paris Olympics. And was this the one Terry McAuliffe was trying to get into Northern Virginia, or was it the 26 games? It was one of the Olympic games. Terry McAuliffe was trying to get to come to Washington, D.C. Oh, good golly. And of course, Northern Virginia and all those places. And you thought Governor Youngkin's plan to build an arena for the Wizards and Capitals was crazy. I mean, McAuliffe, he was going to build entire Olympic stadiums. We were going to become the modern Montreal. Fears are growing that events like the marathon swim, the triathlon, and the para-triathlon could be postponed or canceled because of high pollution levels. This is because the swimmers are told frequently not to take in the water, not to inhale the water. And of course, anyone who's been taught how to swim knows you're supposed to turn your head and breathe and then turn your head. But the idea that you can't drink the water should tell you all you need to know. Should it even be touching my skin? Should all the Olympians be clad in some sort of DC Comics looking outfit? And I've seen renderings of these things where it's, from here down, and then you have the nose clamps, and then everything to, eye goggles, just to keep this filthy water in the Seine out of their orifices. Now understand, Paris is the home to the Paris Climate Accord. I'll wait for you to finish chuckling over this. So Paris, the capital city of the green global agenda, is too polluted to let people swim in their major river. I'll let you digest on that for a minute. Yep. So the Paris Climate Accords are called the Paris Climate Accords because they were held in Paris. That's where Governor Jerry Brown of California said, you need the coercive power of government to say, do this. So how's that been working for Paris? the capital city of the green movement. It's too filthy to allow the swimmers in the river. And the story goes on, NBC News was covering it. Even NBC News is covering this. Can we throw Greta Thunderpants in there? I mean, just thinking. She could be our test swimmer. Throw her in the water and see if she floats. I'm sorry, that was unfair. That was unfair. Certainly, I expect Greta Thunberg to be made of wood. Better. Sorry. Weekend misspent watching Monty Python movies is, I can't help it sometimes. So, Greta Thunberg is been out saying that more needs to be done. This is proof that more needs to be done, and that the developing democracies need to ignore the up-and-coming democracies and the up-and-coming economies. There's developing economies like India and China. Notice how the Ganges is never picked for a place to swim the triathlon. Ganges River might actually be cleaner. I mean, that's just human filth in the Ganges. Apparently the Seine has got all sorts of things floating along it. Because, of course, Paris being home to quite a big drug problem, one would wonder, is that a hypodermic needle there? I don't know, Bob. We better have them checked for performance-enhancing chemicals in there. And I say this not because I like dirty rivers, and that's the contrarian narrative all the time, isn't it? That, you conservo-fascist, Koch brother-funded, blah, 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 blah. You just want dirty rivers. You just want clear-cut forests because they think that stops us from pointing things out. This is one of the reasons, Chris Horner is one of my favorite people, because he doesn't stop. He doesn't allow them. Why? 1 year in Paris, and I wonder, maybe some of the Parisian filth that's floating in the Seine are some of the wanted posters that used to populate the sidewalks of Paris during one of the Paris climate accords. They had wanted posters featuring all sorts of people, including our friend Chris Horner, stapled to telephone poles all around, saying, if you see this guy, call the police, do something. Eco-terrorist, because he says, hey, did you know none of this is going to do anything but make a lot of people wealthy? Which goes back to Lenin's birthday. Because, here on Vladimir Ilyich Lenin's birthday, where, of course, we also, it's Earth Day, on this day we celebrate Lenin. That's the point, is to concentrate power in the hands of a few people. That's why the climate agenda is what it is, because it's not about cleaning the environment. It's just become the most convenient cudgel. And why is it the most convenient cudgel? Because go ahead, prove that it's not going to work. I mean, never minding, let's go back to Michael Mann, the UVA researcher who came up with his hockey stick graph either here or at Penn State. And Michael Mann had to take an entire segment of the data out of his research in order to make his little hockey stick go up at the end. So while they sit there and say, well, Mr. Smarty Pants, prove to us that Greta Thunderpants isn't telling the truth. Well, you can't prove something didn't happen. We have empirical evidence. We have core samples from the poles that show the cyclical nature of warming periods and cooling periods. We have entire ecosystems that were not devastated by the things that you were told were absolutely positively going to devastate those ecosystems. So as I said, happy Earth Day. No, I'm sorry. happy Lenin's birthday.
After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower, otherwise mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining us, tuning in, and for whatever weird reason you like to watch. Let's not use that line again. There's a connotation to they like to watch that I don't think they feel comfortable with either. I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but okay. Just want to make sure they remind me. So, as we gather in this morning, 434-882-4217 is the phone number. You call, you leave a message, or you send emails to jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com. This will all become much simpler once we're on the air at WTON on this Lenin's birthday, Earth Day there. And to be fair, it's also my dad's birthday. Just saying, it is, and so infer what you will from that. I want to jump to Congressman Ben Cline was on Newsmax this weekend, and he was talking about the border outrage and the situation. You know, obviously he was one of the managers of the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, and he was on Newsmax talking about the border situation regardless of what was to go on with the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas.
Well, he can dismiss the charges, he can dismiss the House managers, but he can't dismiss the outrage of the American people about the Biden open border policies and Mayorkas's role in the deaths of countless Americans over fentanyl, over increased crime, the drugs coming across, the human trafficking, sex trafficking. It is truly harming every community, turning every one of our districts in the House into border communities, border districts, and that's why a majority of the House voted to impeach him, because we had to get him removed from office. So it's a disappointment, but it's more an insult to the American people.
Yeah, the senator made this argument that impeachment shouldn't be used to solve policy disagreements, this coming just a few years after his party impeached former President Donald Trump twice in less than a year over political disagreements. Why did you feel specifically, because it is unusual to impeach a cabinet secretary, that this had to be done?
He was violating the law. Mayorkas was violating the law with regard to detention, with regard to parole, and he was also violating the trust of the American people. He was lying to Congress, and this is all evidence that we would have presented. You know, if Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg decided that the FAA, that he wasn't going to be enforcing any of our laws regarding air traffic safety, and planes started crashing, and people were dying, we would want to get rid of Pete Buttigieg pretty quick because you wanted to stop people from dying. If the FDA commissioner stopped testing food or food safety laws, enforcing those laws, and people started dying from poisoning, you would want to get rid of him because people were dying. Well, people are dying across the country from fentanyl, from crime, from the sex traffic that's going on, enriching the cartels.
And so that it was Congressman Ben Cline, Virginia's 6th district, and on Newsmax over the weekend. But one of the things, I mean, he lays out there perfectly one of the things that's going on, and this is adjunct to the Lenin's birthday as well, is this Politburo, this Knights of the Round Table, these cabinet secretaries that are the shadow government. They're not even the shadow government anymore. I would make the argument that Congress is really the shadow government these days because most people are just aware of the administrative state. So what Ben Cline was rolling through there is just a treatise in this elected monarchy that we're trundling towards participation in again. November is going to come at the end of Virginia's 45-day voting cycle. And we will be torn apart as a country because people in various political parties have money to be made and agendas to be fulfilled and promises to keep based on who is the elected monarch of America. And some of it has to do with the green agenda. Some of it has to do with the money transfers and the money laundering that goes on in the green agenda. But there's other eddies and currents, and there are other portals that the largesse, the 16th Amendment-driven power that the presidency wields through these executives. You know, Ben Cline was just rattling off a great list of people who would or should perhaps stand for impeachment if they were to be causing, you know, the deaths of people, the FDA, the FAA, the Secretary of Transport. It's a master's class in the centralization of the power so that these 15, 20 men and women can do irreparable harm to a country. The Secretary of Education. We're not even talking about the Department of Justice and the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security overseeing the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the surveillance state. We're not even talking about that. My gosh, you add that into the mix. And the surveillance state. I mean, a friend of mine tweeted, there was a picture a woman had posted to her Facebook page. Look at the new cloud seeding technology that we had, that she had just installed on her airplane. And a friend of mine posted on the picture, he said, can we come up with some new conspiracy theories? We're starting to run out of the old ones. But this is what we need. We have to be turned on each other because it's, you know, this king or that king. There was a poll just over the weekend was released, and the poll question was, who do you think is best equipped to handle the job of president? And President Trump ran away with it until they put Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in there, and then all of a sudden Joe Biden was just slightly ahead because all the people who said Donald Trump was better than Joe Biden said, well, maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is. And this is contrary to many other polls that have come out and said that most of the votes that would go, and this isn't a popularity poll, but most of the votes that would go to Joe Biden are lost to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., where he gets 8 to 15%, depending on the states. Most of that 8 to 15% comes from President Biden, not from President Trump's electorate. But then if you go to the statewide, state-by-state polls, he doesn't show up at all. I mean, if you go state by state, he's around 5%. And that's why if you look at 270 to win and you do the mathematics, the arithmetic that goes along with some of the state polls, you're like, wow, Donald Trump's going to get like 293. I mean, there's conceivably a scenario where Donald Trump could get 300 electoral votes. What would they do about that? Well, then they would begin what they did over the weekend, which was another movement in Washington, another protest, and amongst the Jews are bad protests, amongst the oppressed, the marginalized terrorist groups that haven't been given their fair share, despite threatening to blow up cafes and schools all over the world. There was a protest in Washington for national popular vote again for president. And I was watching the protest and the news coverage of it, and I said, my gosh, if we think it's bad now, imagine what it would be like if we had a national popular vote. And there are people who will make the argument that the Zuckerbucks can't possibly keep up with the national popular vote. I'm not talking about the Zuckerbucks. I'm talking about the us versus them mentality. This bordering on violence narrative that has gripped us year after year, really since 2004. You started to have the seeds of it in 2004. They borrowed Johnny Cochran's defense of O.J. Simpson, added race to the mix, said that this old white guy is better for the black community than that old white guy, because he says he's going to give more things. He's the party of Lyndon Johnson. And this is the problem with the black community right now as far as Democrats are concerned. They're approaching 30% support for Donald J. Trump for president, because they realize that, well short of the predicted 200 years that Lyndon Johnson said the black community, not his words, my sanitization of them, would continue to vote for Democrats once the New Deal was done. Well, what is the Green New Deal but just a ramping up of the old New Deal? And that it's just more wealth transfers under the banner of environmentalism. And at this point, when you look at how devalued the dollar is and how much debt is out there and how much currency that's baselessly being just thrown around. I mean, I look at the billions of dollars we sent to Ukraine and I say, well, that's hardly $1 million in 1964 money. I mean, really, folks. If we didn't have such bad inflation, we could have sent a lot less money to Ukraine and they could have bought more with it, just like every other consumer of American durable goods. But watch for the national popular election, people, to continue, especially when Donald Trump wins in November. The national popular vote people will come back out and they'll wheel Hillary Clinton out and Joe Biden out, because inevitably they'll say, we won the national popular vote. We should be the king. Because 30% of the population voted for them and 29.9% of the population voted for the other person. And that gives them a mandate from the masses. Oh, stop. More Monty Python and the Holy Grail sneaking into our narrative this morning. That's no mandate from the masses. We're in a narco-synchronous commune. But the power of these executive branch offices with their own police departments and their own court systems, extra-constitutional. These are not courtrooms established under Article 3. This is what has gone on. This is why every 4 years, rather than worrying about who's going to survive a swim in the Seine River because of the pollution, the home of the Paris Climate Accords, we get at each other's throats because we want our king Your king is bad. My king is good. It's like the War of the Roses every 4 years, only slightly less violent. And like the War of the Roses, quite honestly, some of these folks are practically as closely related as Richard the Lionheart and King John. But that's a story for another day, kids.
After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower. Otherwise, mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning, and Congress at work over the weekend, and that's always a good time for American liberty. We're going to visit with Congressman Bob Good, who was, completely my fault over the weekend. We were going to have him on the program on Friday, but you know what? He was just going to tell us basically what was going to happen is the firm, that is Messrs. Johnson, and McConnell and Schumer and Jeffries et al. We're going to ram down some spending bills. This is the interesting side of it is the Ukraine money is tied to different rearranging of the deck chairs. I mean, the Israeli money is rearranging deck chairs, but the Ukraine money is just straight money that your grandkids are going to have to pay back. And Vlad II, Mr. Putin, is furious at the U.S. government for giving aid to Ukraine, and we'll get into that. But I want to talk about the Israeli aid, and more importantly, the protests that exploded when the UN ambassador in the United States in general voted to veto Palestine's admission into the United Nations. Gary in Berlin, New Hampshire, writes to us at jtinthemorningradio at gmail.com. I cannot believe the irony of anti-Semitism running rampant in a prominent New York City university like Columbia. New York City is the second largest city in the world with Jewish population, right behind Tel Aviv. 16% of the population is Jewish. What's next? Mushheads marching along Fisherman's Wharf because 22% of the population in San Francisco is Chinese and they use gas stoves? Shh, Gary, don't give them any ideas. This is perhaps the oldest story in the world, and I don't know what it is. I mean, I think this is, in many ways, I want my team to win. And I got into trouble before we lost the radio station job because I brought up and I said something that I didn't think was going to be controversial. We talked about the Romans crucifying Jesus. And it inflamed a lot of people who were insistent that it was the Jews that killed Jesus, not the Romans. They were just doing what the Romans told them to do. And I said, okay, the crucifixion is a Roman punishment. And yes, you can't deny Caiaphas and Pontius. The involvement of the Jewish temple is notable because Jesus was a pain in their ass. He was, and I'm not sure what the Hebrew phrase for pain in the ass is, but I'm sure it's something like meshuggah. So he shows up for Passover and sees the corruption. He had been sensing the corruption in the temple for a long time, but now he's in Jerusalem and he sees the corruption of the temple's leadership as the governing body. And people say to me, well, how do the Jewish population of New York continually vote for these Democrats, especially now? They say, how do these people, they say, and you see them in Charlottesville here, where the Jewish community lines up and says, please, please, please have a vote on a referendum that will say that the city of Charlottesville backs the Palestinians. You say, really? And you go, how? Why? Because the American Jewish community believes, because they've been told to believe, they've been threatened to believe, that all the problems that the world faces is because of the Jewish community. And that is the cause of the pain of the world, is if they would just stop this whole silly insistence on living in Israel, all would be forgiven. That's basically what the leaders of Germany told the Prime Minister of England right before they started invading, places like France, bombing places like London. No. Poland was one of our native lands. We're just invading to get them back in the fold. Poland was just, no. We're not invading them to invade them. They were terrorizing us. They were coming across our border and killing people back when that kind of thing was frowned upon. So the riots, the marches that have taken place over the weekend, to the point where the Columbia University professor that Gary mentions says, get out, go away, get out of here, is part and parcel of a world that is coming apart, which is missing the point that rabbi from Galilee was about live and let live, was about follow my Father's rules. Thou shalt not murder being amongst them. I'm sure if you wanted to be specific, thou shalt not parasail into a rock concert and murder, if you wanted to be, but I think the commandment is pretty straightforward. So this weekend has been torn apart again because the United States vetoed Palestine's admission into the United Nations. This is the root of all of the new protests, because this is continuing to feed this narrative of the oppressed state and the brilliance of these terrorists who realize that, hey, the United States just falls all over themselves for marginalized communities. And they went, I'm sure they had some books there in the cave, and they went flipping around looking for, how do we get named a marginalized community? And that's where we've come down to now, is that a population that's even smaller in many places. And there are places where the Muslim population is far greater than any Jewish population. And certainly in the United States at large, this is why you see the pandering populists like AOC, and really even Joe Biden to a degree, falling over themselves to try to mollify this community because they see more votes there than they do in the and the Jewish community should just understand they're being treated like so many unborn fetuses. The votes just don't add up. They have some, but they're just overwhelmed now with a Muslim community that's going to vote somebody out of office if they don't take up their cause. And their cause is the elimination of all other theologies on the world. That it's only their way, which if you read Marx, that's exactly his agenda as well. You have to eliminate, and here's where it becomes interesting, because Marx says you have to eliminate religion. And where the Islamists run counter to this is they say, well, okay, the church is the centralized government. So they've sort of taken it, turned it on its head and said, yeah, but in our case, the temple will be the centralized government, and then we can do all the other stuff Marxism says, including eliminate people who don't agree with us. Will writes in, watching on the YouTube channel, about FOIA. We were talking about FOIA earlier on. The Buckingham County School Superintendent makes $189,000 a year, and that's obscene in and of itself. And they complain that they don't have enough money. This was after a 2% teacher raise. Thought it was for teachers, not administration. And this was found out with a FOIA request. But this is one of the places where they weren't smart enough to do it as a money laundering, the superintendent of schools. And we see this time and time again, Will, in school administrations. And they turn their pockets out, and they'll sit anywhere from $8,000 a student to $16,000 a student as expenditures. And then they'll turn their pockets out and say, we don't have enough money. And the teachers are the ones who are in those classrooms. And we did some math, Reagan-esque arithmetic. Even in a school division like Albemarle schools, where they have a restriction, I think it's 13 kids per classroom. That if you added up the $16,000 that's allocated to the education of each one of those kids, the teacher is getting like 4% of that. And so much of it is going to administrators who never darken the portal of a classroom, ever. But this is, again, another place where the administrative state continues to metastasize, continues to grow in there. Tom writes, gosh, you should see Nelson. It's even higher for a county that has about 15,000 full-time students and a declining student enrollment. But you see, that's the thing, is that if there's a declining student enrollment, what they then do is say, we must then start to spend more money on students because that will get more people to move in. And the theory, of course, is if we spend more money on schools, the schools will then appear better at Realtor.com, and then more people will become the come-heres of the future. Oh, they have a good school district. Let's move there. And it's a con. What it is just a way to encourage more people to create a tax base that creates the premise that we need to spend more money on administrators. And there was the old joke, Tommy, you probably remember the old joke, those who can't do teach, and those who can't do or teach administrate.
After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower, otherwise mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Thank you for letting us be of service to you on the on this Lenin's birthday. Pardon me. I'm sorry. I meant Earth Day 2024. There, we appreciate you being as part of the program there. 434-882-4217, or you can email to jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com. Again, when you call, leave a voicemail. Leave your comment or your question as a voicemail, and then we'll play it back, and I will give you my answers. We're collecting the gear necessary. We had to turn some of that in when we lost the broadcast affiliation. So when you call the number 434-882-4217, leave a voicemail there, and then we'll get it in there. But I want to on this Lenin's birthday, I want to go back to a clip on debunking all of the climate agenda. I mean, Earth Day, sorry. When we visited with the author of the Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming, Red Hot Lies, Power Grab, the great Chris Horner. This was,
and when we come down and say we need you to harmonize the underlying work that we're summarizing, we didn't really summarize it. We've got Greenpeace and other folks in the room, and here's what we're going to say, and we need you to harmonize it. So they lost a lot of it was a self-selecting universe at the time, but they've chased away the people like Dick Lindzen and John Christie, who just said we know what you're trying to do, and it's not what we ought to be trying to do, and this is not a good use of our time. So the IPCC is this intergovernmental panel on climate change that was tasked with supporting a global warming treaty. Mm-hmm. And you may recall there are three working groups of the IPCC, one of which is chaired by two economists. Most of these climate scientists, by the way, are economists, and scenarios are all based on the assumptions. But so assume a climate catastrophe, and then what? And working group 3 is chaired by two economists, one from Cuba, of course, the economic miracle that it is, and another from Austria, who speaks in his native Austrian tongue, and then we translate it, named Ottmar Edenhofer. And Dr. Edenhofer, as you may recall, said that just a few years ago he gave an interview to an Austrian newspaper in which he said you have to get over this idea that climate policies are about the environment. We de facto redistribute the world's wealth through climate policy. What you might call a gaffe.
or you might say, like, this was him in the basement saying, help me, get me out of here.
Right. He sort of confessed, but it just made perfect sense to him because it makes perfect sense to the organization. Again, the purpose for which it was created was to support a climate treaty. This was way back, and they just keep producing this "it's worse than we thought" series of Fred Smith used to, the founder of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, used to say that the only business in the world where you can have an annual end of the world report with a card to subscribe to next year's issue in the bag. You know, the world's coming to an end. Here's next year's issue.
And that is Chris Horner from the old days when we had the radio broadcast, the author of Red Hot Lies, Power Grab, Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming. And he goes back even before the IPCC report to when this group called Enron, you may have heard of them, Enron, said, boy, it would be great if we had government policy that forced people to buy all of this stuff that we've invested in, like solar panels. Now, we had some wonderful conversations as we lead it into Lenin's birthday this morning. Birthday, not Lenin's birthday at all. But we had some great discussions over the weekend about solar panels and the solar panels and the con that they are when you realize that still to this day, as more and more forested areas are clear cut in Fluvanna County and Louisa County and Albemarle County to put up these solar panels, no one answers the question, what happens when these things have to be disposed of? Well, the only place that actually has addressed what happens to these solar panels when they have to be disposed of is the place that has been putting up solar panels longer than any other state in the union, California. So what do you think California says about disposing of solar panels? They have to be treated as hazardous waste. Then you have Louisa County, where the farmers of Louisa County are fighting the runoff from some of the solar farms, because every time it rains heavily, all of the ground underneath goes pouring into their fields and smothering their crops. There's that. And then in Georgia, you actually have a solar array that has about 10% of its facility cracked or damaged in storm, and nobody is saying, hey, what happens to all that stuff when it rains on it and then the stuff runs out of the bottom of the... Anyone checking this? We are, under government edict, running into a situation that will make Love Canal, and I lived in Western New York, when they reopened the housing community known as Love Canal. They've renamed it because, well, Love Canal. But that housing development they built on the old carborundum factory, on the despoiled earth, that's going to look like the Garden of Eden compared to what some of these places and the water supplies full of barium and cadmium and all the other lyrics of that wonderful song that sings the periodic table of elements. There's going to be more rare earth minerals in our water poisoning us than you can shake, a green flag at. And so while it's obviously doesn't do anything for the planet, what it does do, aside from making some people very wealthy, is it also makes us very dirty. Let me go to the phones here at 434-882-4217. Let's see who left a voicemail for us. And let's get that, and we'll do it this way.
Well, good morning, Mason Pickett.
Hey, good to hear.
I was looking for you on Google to see what I could learn, and there you are.
Here we are.
And congratulations, sir. And I'm guessing that you are operating through that radio station that you purchased, and best of luck on that. Oh, I got a story on Augusta Health.
Uh-oh.
Sad story. I may have to hold up on it until I get some more information together, but it could come quickly. And the bottom line on that is I had messages on the back of my car, got a bumper sticker and something on the window, and apparently it upset the leftists extremely bad.
Shocked.
They even left a note
no.
on my car one time,
Yeah.
sort of chastising me for what I was doing. And a guy came out of the gym, and I was leaving, and I was sitting in my car, and he gave me this vicious look and gave me the bird. And I rolled my window down, and I said, "You're not mad at me. You're mad at Biden." And I pulled off, and he was following me down the street on foot, telling me to come back, gesturing with his hands. And I hollered something out the window. Been best if I hadn't hollered anything, but I don't think he heard it. But I think a young lady that I was going toward a few car lengths away might have heard it. Mm-hmm. And I reported it to the establishment administration, and they were all, we got to take care of that.
Oh.
And next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call 3 days later telling me I'm expelled from the gym.
Because you're the one. You're the
might it be a
problem.
lot of pressure from the leftists? And I got a letter stating because I had been in jail and I was considered to be dangerous.
Okay.
So, more to come.
All right.
Good
well,
luck, sir.
Thank you, Mason. I appreciate it. Long-time caller, first-time listener. No, have it the other way around. Mason's a regular contributor to our radio show. Here's a good one for you, Mason. One of the things we are going to do with the new radio digs is we're going to establish what I call the whistleblowers hotline, and we're going to encourage folks to see something, say something. To be that whistleblower that calls, and then we will enterprise our newsroom. I certainly will take the comments and bring them on the air, but we will enterprise our newsroom to go after whatever it is that you saw to try to find out the rest of the story and to find out what went on. And it could be anything. It could be like this story with your gym that kicked you out because you were the one getting yelled at by somebody, which is often, what winds up being the case there. And so when you see how this agenda works, you just see it, as Mason's call just said, which is shout you down rather than try to figure out what it is you're thinking of. This goes back to our celebration of Earth Day. Lenin's birthday. Sorry, we always. So Lenin's birthday began this world where we celebrate the people who have to be removed from a community. Marx's premise, which is if you don't get along, you must be removed. And as I said at the onset of the program, isn't that inspiring? I mean, that's right there with we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. It's right there. It's the same idea. If some of you don't get along, you'll have to be removed. That's this green agenda. That is the blue planet in green shackles that Václav Klaus saw when he started hearing about the Green New Deal and the green agenda, when he had wrested his Czech Republic from the Marxists, and then the green agenda people showed up there, and unlike the Ukrainians who said, "Ooh, this sounds good. This world government, this new world order, that sounds pretty good to us, Bob. What do you think, Vasily?" Because one of the things Madison did when he concocted the U.S. Constitution was to try to come up with ways to limit the power of individuals, because all of us, myself included, come with 7 immutable vices that are used to corrupt our decision-making constantly. Multiply that out by 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, and you have quite a morass. Nowadays, with social media, you can probably get that morass in video form as well. So it goes without saying, but we have to say it because there are too many in the media that won't say it, that this is about centralizing power. And so communism works wonderfully. It works beautifully about centralizing power in the hands of a few. And after the Civil War, we were told that we had to centralize power in order to protect ourselves from ever having another civil war.
After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower, otherwise mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining in, letting us do what we do with you here on YouTube. More and more of the old radio listeners are finding us here on the interwebs, and we appreciate that. And joining us from the Directorate of Sports. We say this, it's Lenin's birthday, so we all have to have directorates. But he is the great Mac McDonald. Good morning, Mac. How are you doing, sir?
Good morning, Joe. Coffee Monday. What could be better?
There you go to that.
This is it.
So what's
it's all good.
Scribbled in your notebook this morning?
Yeah, a lot of, there was a lot that happened over the weekend, and a lot of headliners in golf. I'll talk about Scotty Scheffler and Nelly Korda wins 5 in a row. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. But Michael Jordan's race team and Tyler Reddick won at Talladega. So Jordan picks up his first, Michael Jordan says, I can't control anything. It's frustrating. But anyway, a good win for them. All right, well, Virginia clinches 20-23-24. Smithfield Commonwealth clash against Virginia Tech. Performances by the UVA women's lacrosse team beating Tech on Friday, and the Cavalier men's and women's golf teams allowing Virginia to win the Smithfield Commonwealth clash. So it wasn't the baseball team, though, that had the best of Sundays. Georgia Tech beat Virginia Sunday, winning the series 17-12 was the final. The Jackets scored 10 runs from the 4th through 6th inning. Junior Griff O'Farrell goes 5 for 5, a couple of doubles and a dinger, and skipper Brian O'Connor minced no words on the Sunday loss.
Bottom line is, they beat the hell out of us. We couldn't get them out, and that's a credit to them. They had 25 hits. I can't remember the last time a team has done that. Every guy we ran out there, they had a great approach against, and we couldn't get them out on a consistent basis.
Got to get them out, So anyway, Liberty in town tomorrow to close the homestand. Rangers take game 1 against the Caps, 4-1, 3-goal second period. Game 2 of the best of 7 will be Tuesday night. Now, in golf, after the Masters foray, you get together for this little thing in Hilton Head. It's kind of a party for the pros who just drive south from Augusta and get to Hilton Head. Scotty Scheffler is making the game look so. The rain was the only thing to stop him. All right, a 2.5-hour rain delay. The RBC Heritage got suspended at 7:45. 8 o'clock, Scheffler tees it up. He's got a 5-shot lead with 3 holes to play. He's going to win again. And his caddy has already made. His caddy has already made $1.2 million this year.
It's not bad work.
No, pretty good if you can get it, right? Scotty has a streak of 53 holes with nothing bigger than a 4 on his scorecard. Ooh. Oh, he had a double on Thursday. Are you kidding me? But then there's Nelly Korda, all right? She recovered from a blood clot that required surgery in 2022. Yeah. The LPGA star has won 5 tournaments in a row, is a 2-time major champion after winning the Chevron Championship by a couple of shots Sunday. They're playing at the Woodlands, Texas, place called the Club at Carlton Woods. Korda joins Nancy Lopez and Annika Sorenstam as the only LPGA pros with 5 consecutive dubs. 4 NBA playoff games yesterday. A lot of people going off for big numbers. Harden had 28 for the Clippers, and they got the win. Celtics, Clips, Bucks, and Thunder all grabbed 1-0 leads. Damian Lillard for the Bucks had 35. Nats took the series against the Astros, winning 6-0 Sunday. Mitchell Parker, 7 shutout innings. His second major league start. He's a New Mexico kid who's been in the majors for like ever, and 3 hits, struck out 8, walked nobody. Right. 73 pitches, 57 for strikes. That's how you get it
Let's
done.
really do it.
And
I mean,
the
it's
Orioles,
basically still the same lineup. I mean, they're obviously not banging the garbage cans anymore
Right.
out in the outfield anymore. But out to the, I watched a lot of spring training with the Nationals, and I
Right.
didn't hear the name Mitchell Parker at all. They're all talking about, well, this guy's going to be ready in a few months, and that guy's going to be ready, and we're going to put Cruz back down for some seasoning
he
and
had
Wood,
yeah,
and this guy comes out of nowhere, and he's throwing, and he's a lefty too. I mean, this guy could pitch.
left-hander. He had a great start. Yeah, he had a great start against the Dodgers, and he's now
Yeah.
2-0. So it's a great. Orioles shut out the Royals 5-0. They win that series. Cole Irvin goes 6 2/3, scattered 4 hits. Yankees, Red Sox, Phillies post wins. Mets were shut out 10-0. So those are the teams probably I'll keep up on mostly. For our area, I think the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Phillies are all, and of course Joe's Mets. I got to keep up on.
Hey! Although I did send a note to our general manager, who's just this long suffering rangy, or is it insufferable? There's some suffer in there somewhere.
One of those sufferables.
Rangers fan, and he gave me grief. I said, listen, I'm no longer contractually obligated to root for the Capitals, and I put my Dennis Potvin jersey on, and he said, yeah, but they lost too. So
Yeah,
Icelanders. It's interesting because this is that time of year where these two leagues are all into their playoffs, and yet, as you mentioned, Scotty Scheffler is getting all the clicks on golf, and they're
as he
early in the
should.
season, right?
Yeah, it's really kind of ridiculous what they're doing. Joe, I'm going to close this morning on an interesting interview because it's something that we preach all the time now. I'm not promoting school, but it just so much happens at school that spills over. Bob Costas will not be involved in the Olympics. Costas is 72 years old. Hard to believe. He still looks 28 to me. But Costas he's worked a dozen Olympics and said that he is not going to miss it because he has worked 12. He did an interview over the weekend, and one of the things he talked about, and this is, you can find it and hear the entire answer. So I've got a little clip here where Costas is talking about how he wishes more journalistic shows would return. HBO Real Sports, for example. He goes, ESPN's got a couple. He goes, but we're getting more into just scores and highlights. And he goes, and he said, look out when the NFL buys ESPN. Now, there's some talks and there's some rumblings that the NFL may invest into ESPN. So it's almost like, everything we see is going to be more NFL all the time. Anyway,
don't they already have a network? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. They have it. You're exactly right. They have a network. So anyway, as far as journalism shows, Costas says we need more of those instead of, doing all this reality sports stuff. Here's Bob Costas.
I've always felt that there is no contradiction between loving sports and doing a good job, if you're a broadcaster or writer, of highlighting the drama, the excitement, the shared experience. I think I did a good job of doing that over time, but at the same time saying there are some issues here that deserve journalistic treatment and deserve commentary in the right proportion at the right time.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's something that we preach to our guys all the time, saying, this is not just a highlights, sit at the desk, use all the fancy words and yell when somebody hits a home run. It's not just that. We're trying to instruct, at least a couple of us are. You've got to learn to be a journalist. You've got to learn to cover a story, who to ask, how to break news, that kind of thing. And a lot of our students, the young, and I'm not just saying our students, but a lot of the new people getting into the industry now are more driven by not going inside the issues like Joe Thomas would, for example. I mean, you've built your career, and
you mean the former Browns offensive tackle?
No, I mean the Joe Thomas. I mean, you've built your career on getting answers, talking to the right people, which it takes a little time, and sometimes our students, but the young people, and really the blanket I'm talking about, the young people don't understand that they need to get inside stories. And of course, you know, HBO Real Sports was really, really good. I know ESPN still got their 30 for 30s are awfully good. And so anyway, it's just
so much of that is done, and this is something I've told people, and as we
Mhm.
rebuild WTON in Stanton Waynesboro, and hopefully get to do some more radio in Charlottesville, and who knows, I will drop that Easter egg out there.
I understand. I
But
understand.
one of the things I've said, it's perfectly in my world permissible to read a press statement from, say, Carla Williams. And Carla Williams, UVA athletic director, says the UVA basketball team will go to the Final Four. And that's perfectly fine because it's attributed to Carla Williams. So that's not even journalism. But what you get nowadays are people saying UVA basketball is tabbed by some to go to the Final Four, because I think there are people that teach folks like you and me, young folks who are trying to get into this profession, that it needs to be your opinion, because people will latch on to you. You will become popular if you tell us what it's your opinion, and this is the definitive answer of this program, versus just, hey, Senator Tim Kaine says Obamacare is going to be the greatest healthcare system on the planet, or the anchor saying Obamacare is going to be the best. Which is it? And are you the PR person? Because I think it's perfectly okay if you are the DNC chair or the White House press secretary. Well, of course she's going to say the president's made all the right moves. It's up to the journalist to then say, okay, we've got Karine Jean-Pierre saying this. Let's see what we can find out over here that might contradict that. It's what Woodward and Bernstein were doing in Watergate. But in sports, I think it is important because there is so much money involved, and people are being told, spend $180 for an outfield seat at Nationals Park, and you say, what? Why am I doing that? And so I think it is important that people, as consumers of this entertainment medium, know what's going on, backstage, not just for the salaciousness of it, but like you said, the Shohei Ohtani.
I was thinking the same thing. That's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly what I was thinking.
Is this why the Angels haven't made the playoffs in Mike Trout's adult life? But I mean, these are questions, because you're dropping down your do-re-mi for season tickets, or even just the one you might be able to afford, or you're a big advertiser, you're a sponsor, or you're the municipal government that builds them a stadium. I mean, people incinerated me, Mac, because I was the only conservative voice that was against, Sean Kenney of Fluvanna, also against the idea of building arenas for the Wizards and Capitals with taxpayer money, even though it seemed like the one show. But Joe, that's what you sound like Louise Lucas, and she's a Democrat, and she's against. I just don't. I've never seen these arena projects pencil out, and so by doing so, I became the bad guy. But that's the problem we have, is that there are people who, hey, you're John Sterling. They just had John Sterling weekend, right? He's the press secretary for the New York Yankees. So he's not going to go on Channel 11 or wherever they are, the Yes Network, and say, boy, we really miss George Steinbrenner because Hank really doesn't know his ass from a mossy tree knothole, but because he's not going to do it. That's not his job, but that might be somebody else's job to get in there. Everyone torched Susan Waldman. Oh my God, it's Roger.
Roger is in George's box.
But that's her job. She is the PR firm for the Yankees. If somebody wants to say, hey, was the fix-in, that's a different thing. But that's it's good stuff that you're teaching them, and it gives me hope that even somebody like a Bob Costas, who might at some point turn around and say, why is the sky over Beijing so brown, would have said something about that, but he didn't at the time. So I'm just being
you got to go deep, and if we didn't have that kind of, I mean, the Ohtani thing could have gone forever.
Yep,
I mean, his interpreter could have been betting forever. We never would have known unless somebody. And if you want to see the perfect example of how it's done, what is it? 8 is enough. Eight men out. 8 men out.
Right. Yeah.
The great 8 is enough. That was a TV show. 8 8 Men Out, one of the greatest baseball movies and history lessons of the 1919 Black Sox scandal. Watch those reporters, those writers in that movie go after that. That's, that was good stuff. So,
Good stuff. And as always,
all right, man.
Mac, thank you, sir. As always,
all right.
thank you.
See you first thing in the morning.
After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower, otherwise mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the folks who were left in a lurch without a way of knowing where we went. Nobody made any announcements over the radio that you could find Joe Thomas here. So I appreciate folks like Mason, who just called a little while ago and was able to find us finally via the interwebs. And joining us now from the Newsmakers line, representing Virginia's 5th congressional district. He is Virginia 5th District Congressman Bob Good, and thank you so much, Bob, for joining us. And hang on a second here. There it is. And let's get him on there. Good morning, Bob. How are you doing, sir?
Good morning, Joe. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. And so let me ask you a couple of things about this mess that happened over the weekend. And, I don't know, is mess even a fair word for what happened over the weekend?
Unfortunately, I think it represents the worst of Washington, the worst of Congress. As you know, Joe, we were supposed to leave Thursday evening to go back to our district, had some things planned on Friday in my district and Saturday morning. And instead, we stayed 2 extra days until Saturday afternoon, not to do anything for America, not to defend our country or to secure our borders, but instead to borrow nearly $100 billion, send it overseas, a package of 4 bills, cobbled together in order to try to leverage support for one bill based on the other bills that were parts of the package. We did not keep our commitment to secure our border. Really, it was, again, representing the worst of Washington.
So when you look at this, and I begin my problem with the Ukraine money, because there's no oversight, and you've worked in finance. I mean, when people start looking for money laundering, you start looking at things like the scenario with Ukraine, where we send our grandkids' tax monies over to Ukraine, then they buy stuff from American manufacturers, which all well and good. I'm not against American manufacturers being able to make guns or mines or whatever it is they make, but there's no oversight to it. For Congress, they have to allocate a certain amount of money for defense spending, and we can follow that money and see who's spending what. We have no oversight over what Ukraine is doing. Am I wrong?
To your point, Joe, that was revealed that many do not want that. There was an amendment from Victoria Spartz, the congresswoman from Indiana, a strong conservative Republican, who is from Ukraine. That's her place of birth. She had an amendment that just was going to require greater congressional oversight for the money sent to Ukraine. And that amendment was defeated several months ago, sometime last year. I forget the exact time, but my friend Warren Davidson from Ohio had an amendment to that effect to the previous funding for Ukraine, where it just said, hey, you got to have a strategy, you got to have a plan, you got to tell us what you're doing, how you're doing it. And that was defeated, where it was like, no, just send them the money, no strategy required, no definition required, no plan required. And in this case, it was another $60 billion that divides Americans, certainly divides Republicans in the House. Joe, 112 Republicans in the House voted against the Ukraine portion of the bill. Only 101 voted for it. So it was 53% against as far as Republicans, 47% for it. Now, as you might imagine, there's tremendous pressure from leadership to vote for the bill, and many Republicans do whatever they're told by leadership. So the fact that only 53% of Republicans voted against it doesn't mean that the other 47 all supported it. It just means some of them fell in line, took the company position, did what they were supposed to do. But the Democrats, meanwhile, voted 210 to 0, 100% for the Ukraine aid. While Speaker Johnson and previously before him, the former Speaker McCarthy, have passed significant pieces of legislation with predominantly Democrat votes over the past year, this was the first time it was 100%, 210 to 0. And as you also know, Joe, it broke the Speaker's commitment and our pledge to the American people that we would not send money to Ukraine, fight to secure Ukraine's border without securing our own border. We gave up that massive piece of leverage, the Democrats' desire, the insatiable desire for more Ukraine money, with no border security on the U.S. side. And it was because Speaker Johnson began to desire Ukraine funding just as much as the Democrats. So he therefore had no leverage.
Well, we'll talk about the connection. I mean, you pointed out over the weekend, Bob, how much of this money in this aid package is actually going for border security in Ukraine versus the American border. Why? I just don't understand how all these Republicans can sit there and look at what's going on at the U.S. southern border, realize that this is going to land on their shoulders. I don't know if they think that maybe if they vote to ignore it, that all these illegals in their districts aren't going to vote against them anyway, because we're giving them ID cards, and then the election boards are just looking at the ID card and saying, all right, give them a ballot. How do they... Is there even a logic stream in there, Bob?
Well, I do believe most Republicans, if not all, do want genuine border security and do stand for that to some degree. However, is that something that you're just for in the abstract and you talk about and you advocate for it, or are you willing to actually do something about it, force something about it? Unfortunately, I think the Speaker, he talks a lot about we fought tooth and nail. We're fighting for this. This is the hill we're going to die on. That's how he described border security. And the Speaker, I believe, thinks that words represent fighting. When I say I want something, or I don't want to do this, or I want to do that, I told them that doesn't matter. This is a town, DC is a town of power and leverage and force. We had leverage points in the spending battles where the government had to be funded, or there'd be a temporary government shut down the non-essential operations. The Speaker could have used those leverage points with the funding of the government to try to force border security. He refused to do that because he didn't want a government shutdown. And he feared a government shutdown more than he wanted border security, but he kept promising, we'll use Ukraine. Then you get to Ukraine, the Speaker, kind of like FISA, Joe. The Speaker was 7 years on the Judiciary Committee, where he fought for the very same constitutional protections that we were fighting for in the reforms this year. And instead, he gets a briefing from the Intelligence Committee, and the intelligence community gets in his head and tells him that people are going to die if you require a warrant to spy on U.S. citizens. So he flips his position, and he did not want the protections. Same thing with Ukraine. His position flipped once he talked to the defense industry as Speaker, and he wanted Ukraine funding as much as the Democrats. So back to your question specifically, while I think the vast majority of Republicans do want genuine border security if they can have it, they didn't want it to gum up Ukraine funding. They wanted the Ukraine funding so bad that they knew the Democrats were unlikely to support funding for Ukraine if it was tied to border security. So we should have had that fight and required, in exchange for getting the Ukraine money, they had to secure the border. My amendment that I was putting forward, the Speaker told me would be germane, and then it got changed and it wasn't germane, was they literally, if we're going to fund Ukraine, they wouldn't get the money until forget the policy, until the border invasion numbers got under 1,000 a day. I don't want it to be any, but instead of 10,000 a day, they reduced it by 90%. Then they could get their money. Forget the policies and the promises, because this is an unlawful administration, as we both know. But my amendment was going to take it down to they couldn't get the Ukraine money unless the border numbers got to less than 1,000 a day. But I sidetracked, Joe, your specific point. In the $60 billion for Ukraine, to add insult to injury, there's literally $300 million that is for border security personnel for Ukraine's border, while we're not securing our own border.
Congressman Bob Good is on with us. Greg asked, and I believe, Greg, you live in the 7th District, so I'm going to talk to you about what happens, what's going to be coming up there, because that's going to be a primary battle. But he asks about the speaker battle that transpired at the end of Kevin McCarthy's speakership and the I Want My MTV, as in motion to vacate. Look at some of the folks that were in between, certainly Jim Jordan, and some of these folks that were... now it sort of becomes clear why all these folks were so vehemently fought against in order to get to Mike Johnson. It seems like they felt like he was easier to manipulate than somebody like a Jim Jordan, Bob.
Yeah, and I will caution those who are calling for the motion to vacate right now. Obviously, there's a gentlelady from Georgia who's kind of vocally advocating for that at the moment, and there's a couple of members who have said they support that. It's 3 at this point. I would caution against it. I think it's telling, Joe, that the 8 of us who were part of the previous motion to vacate with the former Speaker McCarthy, we're not chomping at the bit to do that now, because we recognize the pressure, the intensity, the uncertainty, the risk involved with that. And we had an 8 or 9 vote margin last October, where now we're down to a 2 or 3 vote margin. So the uncertainty is much greater. And remember, even the lady from Georgia was one of those who was one of our most vocal, intense critics, saying, oh gosh, you guys are going to elect a Democrat as speaker with doing this, because she was, tied very closely to the former Speaker McCarthy. But it's much more probable now, or possible at least now, that you'd end up with a Democrat speaker, just because you've had 6 months of coalition government where the moderate Republicans and the speaker have joined hands with the Democrats. That's unprecedented, the way that has happened, at least in recent years, to see that happening. Not to mention, you've had resignations. It would not be difficult to conceive 1 or 2 more additional malicious resignations. And Joe, we're actually trying to defeat some of these moderate Republicans in primaries in the month of May. There's a number of primaries where we've got contested primaries where we're advocating for or supporting strong Freedom Caucus types to defeat these moderates. If they get defeated in May, and there's a motion to vacate, some of them might just throw up their hands and just resign and not care that the majority might go to the Democrat. Mm-hmm. And I'll also remind everybody, sorry to belabor the point, but last year with an 8 or 9 vote margin, as you were referencing, we ended up with Mike Johnson. We didn't end up with some courageous conservative that we all are still rallied around. We ended up with someone who's not been any better in terms of material results that have been produced. So it would be difficult to conceive we're going to get somebody better right now. My hope is we'll wait till November. We'll get past the election. We won't hurt President Trump with more disruption in the Republican Party that might hurt ballot turnout in November. And we'll have that contest in November. And I don't think Speaker Johnson would be able to get the support. I think we'll have a new speaker. But I think we'll get a better chance getting consensus around a strong conservative November than we would if we were to do it right now.
Congressman Good, let me ask you and pivot off of that. You had mentioned some of the other things that were going on this weekend, and wrapped up in this aid package, again in typically Washington style, is this Trojan horse. You've called it that. Many of my friends have called it that. I see what's going on regarding TikTok, and how that we the American left, the authoritarians, have cornered us into a position where, well, it's the Communist Party, it's the People's Liberation Army that is manipulating these TikTok feeds, so we want to be able to ban, force them to sell, or be banned from the United States. But there's a whole bunch in here, isn't there, Bob, that would allow this to continue to happen to other platforms like Rumble or Truth Social, right?
Well, in the 4-vote package that was put together, as you noted, you had the $60 billion for Ukraine. You had some $15 billion or so for Israel. But the Israel package, in order to buy Democrat votes for it, they threw in $9 billion for Gaza, read Hamas, by the way. You had some 4 or 5 billion for Taiwan and other Indo-Pacific interests, if you will. And then you had the other bill that had the TikTok ban in it, or I shouldn't say the TikTok ban. I'm misspeaking there. The TikTok divestiture, where it said, "Hey, ByteDance has got to sell. They can't be owned by communist China." And I actually support that. That divides Republicans. It divides Congress. It really cuts on bipartisan lines, about the getting involved with a private entity, private company. But I have great concerns with communist China having control of a company that has so much access to U.S. data, U.S. information. And an example of the concern there was when the previous bill was considered with forcing TikTok to have to be sold from communist China to sell its controlling interest in that. They put a mechanism in place to where you could not use TikTok. The users had to call their Congress member. Ideally, what they wanted, of course, was to lobby against forcing TikTok to be sold before they could use it. And so I have concerns with that. So they added that to the package to try to get the Senate to act on it, because, as you know, the Senate hasn't acted on the bill that the House passed as standalone. But, Joe, there was a fifth bill also. You talked about Trojan horse that we blocked, quite frankly. Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, and finally Thomas Massey joined them with voting against a rule in the Rules Committee. And they blocked the advancement of a pretend border security bill that would not be taken up by the Senate. It was to give cover as a separate bill for those who were voting for Ukraine funding, borrowing that without border security. They were going to allow them to vote on a separate bill that would go nowhere because it had no leverage. It wasn't tied to any must-pass legislation. But then they could say, "Oh, we voted for border security," which we've done before, like the HR 2 that we voted for last May. So that, again, that's why I've said this represents the worst in Washington. And I apologize if you're seeing my screen. I've got some sun coming in this morning. My appearance has changed through the interview.
It's the neo-impressionist screen cap of Bob Good there. Bob, well, I appreciate your visit there. Do you think that there is enough firewalls, and I believe you on this one, in this TikTok divestiture to limit it to TikTok and that kind of thing without it being turned on some regulatory power to go after a Rumble or some other internet site? Bob?
Yeah, I do think it's, yes, I do think it's narrowly targeted enough, Joe. I do think it's narrowly targeted enough that it's limited to TikTok. TikTok or ByteDance has spent a lot of money, and their fans have spent a lot of money trying to scare Americans that it's much broader than that. But Chip Roy was a lead on this bill. Andy Biggs supported this bill, our judiciary friends, and I trust what they've done on the work on this bill. And I think it isn't tailored narrowly enough to not allow it to be applied to something larger than what it's intended.
So I dare ask, what comes up this week, since they made you stay late into Saturday to do more damage to America, better than the British did bombarding Yorktown? What's on the docket this week before we let you go?
Well, thankfully, we're in our districts this week. We're traveling our districts. I will be in about half of the cities and counties in the 5th District. Actually, we're doing the second of our Freedom Fighters tour. So we're going to be in Lynchburg, and we're going to be in Amherst. We're going to be in Mecklenburg and Lunenburg. We're going to be in Albemarle. We're going to be in Nelson County. We're going to be all over the 5th District traveling. We've got friends Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, Ralph Norman from South Carolina, Ben Cline from the 6th District here in Virginia, and Tim Burchett from Tennessee, among others, will be traveling with me this week across the district.
Well, travel safely, Bob. Thank you for checking in with us. Again, his website is good.house.gov, and you have a wonderful morning, sir.
Thank you, Joe. You as well, my friend.
Joe Thomas in the morning here. Thank you. We'll be right back and get some of your emails as well.
After a chilly start to your Monday, we warm up nicely. Sunny skies, an afternoon high of 65. Monday night, mostly clear, lows around 39. On Tuesday, sunny with an afternoon high around 72. Slight chance of a shower Tuesday night, partly cloudy and 53. On Wednesday, slight chance of a shower, otherwise mostly sunny, highs in the lower 70s. Not to worry, those warmer 80s are back for the coming weekend. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for kicking off the week with us here, YouTube and Rumble, and then share, please. We'll reshare. I was reminded that we had forgotten to do that last week after the show is done. To yes, happy Lenin's birthday. Earth Day here across central Virginia. And as we celebrate here, keep in mind that this is what it's about. It's about authoritarianism. It's about being able to, this email comes in from Mike, who says, will they force the Chinese Communist Party to divest from Smithfield? So absolutely. If there's an upside of this TikTok situation, can we then use this regulation to get the Chinese Communist Party? But let's go back to the tens of thousands of 22, 23, 24-year-old Chinese men that have come across the southern border, and that's just the amount that has been counted by immigration and customs enforcement officers. Somebody brought that up to me, and I said, well, what about the officers of the CCP, of the PLA, that are on student visas right now at our universities? And this is where I think, again, people will say, you're just out there pitching Trump, whatever. That President Trump had, of all the things that you can say about him, the international affairs was so much, and including his interactions with China, including his ability to get China to, I hate to use the word behave, but to recognize that their trade agreements were bad with us and that we were allowing for things that we shouldn't allow or wouldn't allow someone else to do. So he was, perhaps, of all the things you can say about President Trump as we go towards election season, is that his international affairs, whether it's Abraham Accords, his ability to get China to get in line, the Mexican situation with the border, these are all things that wither, and I know there's people who are suffering many levels of TDS that would say, oh, well, that was his Secretary of State, that was Nikki Haley, whoever it may have been that you wanted to credit it with, saying he didn't do it, it was his cabinet secretary, insert name, whether it be criminal justice reform or reining in some of the FISA abuses, the black community working on recidivism. You could say, oh, that wasn't really Trump. That was all the people around him. Well, there were a lot of people around him who wanted to do him dirty as well. But at the end of the day, isn't that the point, though? Isn't the point being a government that governs the least? And when you talk about all of these things that all of these government agencies start to do, you realize that this is the metastasized tumor on the body Americana that has grown and grown and grown and is restricting blood flow. It's not supposed to be. And part of the problem, and this is going to sound controversial, but come closer. Part of our problem is that after the Civil War, we wanted a strong European-style centralized government, but we didn't have the intestinal fortitude to actually change the Constitution. So they worked around the periphery. They worked around the edges. They passed this bill. Then they passed the other bill over here to fund things, to send money to. You couldn't say no to money. Money is money. And so they started to pay off and I'm going to use a word here that's going to trigger you, but I don't mean it to say dumbness. I'm going to say ignorance, as in the effort to ignore something, the effort necessary to, oh, well, look at the bird up there. The federal government arrested somebody in my neighborhood. Oh, but did you see the bird? They send money to our law enforcement agencies and to our educational institutions and then say, hey, we are going to invoke authority over you that nothing in the U.S. Constitution gives us. And when we push back, we win little battles here and there, and firms like First Freedom Legal Team and those folks are successful usually when they get them back into line. Will writes in, Bob helped cost Republicans their race for the General Assembly. And Bob, Will, I don't know how much you listen, and you're a good guy, and I like Will a lot. But I have disagreed with that from the moment it happened. And of course, the premise Will is working on is that because the Freedom Caucus had done all this with Speaker McCarthy, who was, if nothing else, somebody who would throw a lot of money around and had a lot of money, it made Republicans split and didn't show up. So then you're saying, the premise being, as I gameplay it out, that the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Virginia is simply a function of the National Party? And so Rich Anderson and some of the folks in the Republican Party of Virginia have no say in that? I know there were people who didn't vote, but then, Will, your point is also laid in the lap of President Trump, because there are an awful lot of people who point to President Trump's election in 2016 as the reason the Virginia House flipped to all Democrat, rubber stamping Ralph Northam's agenda in 2017 and 2019. There are people like David Ramadan at the University of Virginia Center for Larry Sabato celebrations, who, along with Liz Cheney, serve on the board of the UVA Center for Politics, and he was a great Republican in the Virginia General Assembly, abandoned his seat because people told him Donald Trump didn't like Muslims. And a Democrat took it over. One of those votes that helped Ralph Northam tie us to California. So if your premise is that Bob Good cost Virginia's General Assembly flip in 2023, well, that is just as likely as Donald Trump cost the majorities in the House and Senate in Virginia in 2017 and 2019. And of course, it also takes the blame away or the authority over their own races to people who lost them, because there are plenty of people who lost their own elections. But anyway, it's time for us to fly here until tomorrow morning. Who has any idea what tomorrow morning is? We're going to start revisiting with our friends from the Alzheimer's Association. We will do that. But until tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., same place, same time, here as we get closer and closer to rebroadcasting somewhere, ... I'll leave that Easter egg for you as well. So long, and thanks for all the fish.